You're listening to the REI Marketing Nerds podcast, the leading resource for real estate investors who want to dominate their market online. Dan Barrett is the founder of AdWords Nerds, a high-tech digital agency focusing exclusively on helping real estate investors like you get more leads and deals online, outsmart your competition, and live a freer, more awesome life. And now, your host, Dan Barrett.
All right, everybody, welcome to this week's episode of the REI Marketing Nerds podcast. As always, this is Daniel Barrett here from AdWordsNerds.com. Now, this week, I have an incredible interview with Damon Remy, the brains behind the software called REI Black Book, and we get into a really wonderful conversation. Before I get into that, I feel like I have to say a few words about the coronavirus. As I'm recording this, the coronavirus is, becoming more and more of an issue of the United States. We've got restaurants kind of being, shut down and people limited to gatherings of 10. And it's a little bit wild out there. I'm not going to lie. And I am preparing and will have an entire episode on how this is affecting the online marketing world. So I'm going to pull data from all of our clients. I'm going to have actual numbers for you. So you can look out for that episode next week. I just need a little bit more time to get some numbers together and really figure out what's going on. But I do want you to be able to turn to this podcast as well as our Facebook group, which is the REI Marketing Nerds Facebook group. That's at adwordsnerds.com/group for realistic and clear-eyed information. I will say that it is easy to, feel nervous and feel anxious in times like this, but we don't really know what's going to happen to the housing market. We don't really know what's going to happen to the online marketing space. And I want to make my own business decisions, and I want you to make your business decisions on real data, on real world numbers. And I want us to try to be as rational and reasonable as possible. So with that in mind, I'm going to do my best to turn this podcast into a really great resource for you. Like I said, you can, follow me here. You can find us on the REI Marketing Nerds Facebook group. Again, adwordsnerds.com/group. I will be posting in there regularly about the data that we're seeing in Google as it results to the coronavirus and how it's affecting finding motivated seller leads online. All right. Now, this week, I'm actually going to leave this interview up and do this week because actually, this week's interview directly deals with one of the most critical factors for turning motivated seller leads into deals, and that's follow-up. Damon has thought a ton about this. The software that he uses, REI, or not that he uses, that he created, REI Black Book, is really amazing in terms of being able to do a whole bunch of stuff. It's a CRM and a follow-up system and all this stuff. So this is one of those things because as we get into, let's say we go into a market that's a little bit rougher than you may be used to, or maybe a market that's rougher than we've had in quite a while. Following up with leads and being able to consistently do that over time is going to be one of the critical components to staying profitable during this kind of like wild times that who knows, maybe we're entering into. So without further ado, let's get into this interview with Damon Remy from REI Black Book. And like I said, tune in next week. We're going to do an entire episode on how the coronavirus, COVID-19, is affecting the online marketing space for real estate investors. All right, this is Daniel Barrett here, and I am with Damon Remy from REI Black Book. You can find all about them at reiblackbook.com. Damon, my wonderful friend, how are you? What's going on, man?
I am good, man. I appreciate the opportunity to come chat with the audience. I gotta admit, man, I'm a little bit more excited about this interview than most because every time you and I chat, I think we connect a very similar sense of humor and perspective on the world, man. So I'm excited to be here and kind of chat with your tribe.
Yeah, man. I was very excited to have you on, and I gotta say, so literally, and this happens, I would say like maybe 10% of the time when I do this podcast, but literally before we got into it, I'm saying your name like I'm doing the little intro thing. And I got super paranoid that I'm mispronouncing your last name. Like we met and I just said it wrong and that you'd never corrected me or something like that. Now it's like, it's too late. So it's Remy, right?
That's a really good question because honestly, if you mispronounced it, I'm not sure I would know.
Okay.
So I went my entire life hearing it both ways, so much so that I don't even know anymore.
All
so
right.
I believe it is. I believe it is Remy. I say Remy a lot, but
you people say Remy?
Yeah, I'm telling you, that's actually how I used to say it. There's a whole long story about boot camp though, and I'll tell you that next time we're together and we have a drink. But
all right. What do your parents? What do your parents say? What do your parents call you? They say Remy because is it like so I associate the name Remy with like New Orleans and like the Bayou and stuff like that. I think because Remy is the name of Gambit from the X-Men and like he's from New Orleans. So I don't know, like, is that like
it is a French origin. Okay. So you've got kids. Have you guys ever watched Ratatouille?
I have never seen Ratatouille.
All right. Well, if you got to go watch Ratatouille. That needs to be on your top list now.
Okay.
Of things to do.
All right.
And you'll see that the French chef, who's a mouse, is his name is Remy. So
okay. All right.
There we go.
Well, this is the type of hot real estate tips that my audience tunes in for. Well, all right. So let's move this to real estate world. Although I'd rather just talk about Pixar, but we could talk about real estate world. And you are kind of sort of the mastermind behind this incredible piece of software. It's called REI Black Book, right? And it does 1,000,001 things. And I want to spend a lot of time talking about that kind of stuff because I think it's super, super valuable for this audience to hear. But before we get into that, why don't you kind of walk people through a little bit of your story? Like what got you into real estate investing, this kind of like weird world that we're both part of?
Yeah, absolutely, man. So I would say that journey, there's a couple pieces that are important to understand. My tech journey, the technology piece, I really kind of found that love in the military. So I did a lot of really cool stuff, some research and development in the military when I was super young, and somehow got out of the military and ended up working in the mortgage business. And we're talking the mortgage business in the height of, if you had a pulse and could fog a mirror, you could get a loan, right? So this massive mortgage boom is going on, super competitive, tons of mortgage companies, tons of loan officers. And, really what I truly love, the two passions that I love, and I almost say three, but really the two drivers, I love marketing and I love technology. And then we've really kind of added that third component, real estate. But back in the mortgage days, we were basically just trying to stand out, right? How do we market ourselves a bit differently than everybody else? Because everybody else on the radio and TV and print was all advertising the lowest rate. Right. Well, the interesting thing about that whole business is that we're all selling the same money, right? So we literally have access to the same banks, the same loan programs, and it's really pretty much typically this very similar to same rates.
Right.
And so we really started focusing heavily on real estate investors. Now, most loan officers didn't want to service real estate investors because you got to do the same amount of work for a much smaller loan size. And they typically get paid commission, right, based upon the loan amount. And so not many folks focused on real estate investors, but we figured out that if you focus on real estate investors would do multiple deals a year. Right. And once you did one loan for them, you already had all their pay stubs. Basically, it was like an assembly line, if you will. And so long story short, we really started focusing on the real estate investor market back in 2004, 2005. And, to stand out in that space, we just said, okay, what can we do to help a real estate investor, right? So the age-old rule of marketing is just provide value, right? Mm-hmm. So what value could we add to the real estate investor? Not necessarily thinking about our end result yet, although that's where it ultimately leads to. But we basically just said, okay, if we could help them buy more properties and do more deals, right? Help them manage those properties and exit the properties faster, then they would need to come back to us more frequently, right? So that was really kind of it. That's how we actually got into it. And so that's how we got focused on real estate investing. of course, start hitting up all of the local REIA clubs and meetings and just really dive into that whole world that I don't know that I knew existed, at that time,
Right.
2005, 2006. And then got heavily involved myself. I've got a couple of properties, rentals myself, rehabbed a couple of properties. But really what I was doing back in that day was using what I knew, which was marketing and technology. And we built a handful of tools to, I'll tell you, we actually kind of had the idea for Facebook before Facebook. We just didn't know it. Right.
Yeah.
But we did it on a much smaller scale. We did Facebook basically for real estate investors.
Yeah. Wow.
Here in the St. Louis market. So we were able to allow all the investors to connect and do deals on a platform so they could post their deals, they could share deals. We would build websites for those deals. They could, go search the deals. That was really how REI Black Book started. And it was completely free. So we gave that away 100% because at the end of the day, we knew that if we could help them do more deals, they needed more money, which, they'd come back to us for the loans.
Yeah.
And it worked great. I mean, we were recognized as one of the top brokers in the area and national recognition. I had 2 guys on my team that were, more loan volume transaction. They were in the top 200 loan officers in the entire country. I mean, it was going well until 2008.
So wait, hold on. What happened in 2008? I'm not sure. I don't remember. I'm trying to remember back to that year.
So there's probably some folks on your podcast right now that probably don't remember. Literally, right?
Well, it's very true, and it's a running theme. It's so interesting to me that a lot of the people that come on and do interviews, right? They have a 2008 story.
Yeah,
and it's it's always everything was like this until 2008, and then it was something else, right? And it's been really fascinating because we were talking about before we jumped on the call. We were talking about coronavirus as we record this is kind of a big deal, and you were talking about sort of historical precedents, right? There are other times that diseases have kind of come and gone, and what were those like? In statistics, we would say referring to the base rate, right? So it's one of the things that's really fascinating to me is, and one of the things I think brings a lot of value of having those conversations is now when I talk to investors, especially recently, a lot of people are hey, it feels like we may be headed towards something that's similar to 2000, right? And it's of course, everything's cyclical. Always, sooner or later, bell bottoms are popular, then they're not popular, and then they're popular again. It's right, well, the housing market is kind of the same way. So hearing the 2008 story is always so fascinating to me because it's well, cool, how do you adapt and change and not just survive, but grow when you're in the mortgage business? Hey, that whole business kind of got turned upside down. So yeah, I think it's always a really interesting thing to kind of touch on.
Yeah. So 2008, since I was in the mortgage business, affectionately call that the mortgage market meltdown, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, that's
Triple M.
It was very devastating. Impacted obviously real estate investing, retail real estate. Just the economy as a whole. And it really is crazy to think, man. I mean, that was 12 years ago. So I guarantee you got some 22-year-old. That's listening to this call right now, and they were 10 and probably didn't have as much impact for them directly, maybe their parents or something like that. But it was pretty devastating, man. So, that was the year. I think in 2008, I think I made about $16,000 that year, right? So
wow,
it was, another record-setting year, just the other way.
Hey, you could set records in any direction. People don't think about that, right?
Right, yeah. Exactly. You set the bar low enough, but so it's really hard to adjust your lifestyle, man. And I, I don't live extravagantly or anything like that, but was really facing foreclosure, bankruptcy, the whole nine, man. I mean, it was just really devastating. And I remember, we had this set of tools, and we didn't call it REI Black Book then, but it was this whole set of different kind of hodgepodge of tools, software tools that we knew were helping real estate investors. And the interesting thing is in 2008 and 2009, for the investors that were prepared, it was one of the best opportunities to go and buy real estate. So we knew that our clients were going to continue to do deals. It's just they weren't going to be able to use our commercial money, if you will, right? So they had to go find, and now we hear about private money and hard money, and so all the institutional lending really wasn't available to them, but they kept doing deals. And so we just asked ourselves a simple question, man. We said, hey, what if instead of giving the tools away, what if that was the product? And we turned it into a subscription service. So October 1st, 2009, we sent out an email. And it was, by the way, I know you're a marketer, man, and you'll probably love this stuff, but it was probably one of the highest open rates I've ever had. Okay.
Really?
So 2004, 5, 6, 7, stated income was huge for real estate investors, right? But in 2008, when all the banks started closing down, that was one of the first loan programs that they took off the table, right? Because it was so risky. So we sent out an email that said the subject line was stated income is back. Now, this is also when I learned about congruency and truth in marketing, because it was not true. So as soon as they opened up the email, we said, just kidding.
Whoa. That's pretty ballsy to open with just kidding. Usually it's like, it's like 75% into a 10-page copy written letter or something where you.
Oh no, man. It was, so what we were doing literally, we were announcing our launch party. So we were going to launch the software. We had repackaged it up. And so October 1st, 2009, we were going to do this big party. Yeah. And it was ultimately a launch party for our local investors. And literally we did send out the email that said stated income is back, and then open it up. Said, just kidding. But we do have free pizza and beer. Come hang out. And, we got it's definitely super high open rate, but a lot of response as well. And not all of it was very nice, right?
Yeah, so, I can imagine. The free pizza and beer is pretty sweet, but I can get that.
But yeah.
So you guys launched REI Black Book. It's wild to me because if anybody's listening to this, if you've never used REI Black Book, it is an incredibly deep piece of software. It kind of goes in a million different directions. It's one of these things where, if you want to do it in terms of, helping with your marketing or running your follow-up or managing your deal flow, all that stuff, if you can think of it, you can kind of do it in REI Black Book, right? So when you think about REI Black Book now, kind of flashing forward to the present here, right? Like, how do you think about what REI Black Book is, right? Because it strikes me as like it would be so easy to be like, spread into a million different directions. So like, how do you think about like where it fits, like in a real estate investor's business or in the industry or kind of where it is currently?
It's really interesting, man. So if I'm going to think back for a second to 2009.
Yeah.
If I would have known then what I know now, I don't know that REI Black Book would exist in the way it does today.
Huh.
I think that if I went out to California and went up to Silicon Valley, I think most of the software guys, most of the tech companies, they would tell me I'm crazy because we didn't necessarily focus and go all in on one particular tool, right? And there's strategies behind that, and I totally get it. Like, let's just say, so texting is one of the really big things we do, right? So if I just built a texting tool and that's all I did, I could become the category king of texting.
Right.
And it would be so much easier to sell and to market that product. It would also be easier to support it and to continually develop it, right? So if I just built a texting tool, right, so much easier. But I'm thankful that I didn't know what I know now, because I think truly the challenge with that, there are so many quote unquote category kings out there.
Right.
So now I've got to go get a software for my contact management system. I've got to go get a software system, different system to manage my websites. And then I've got to have a platform for email marketing and then text marketing. And then, if my phone rings, how do I manage the incoming calls? And most importantly, how do I see the data and the transaction across all of these different platforms? And so now all of a sudden typically what happens is you go out and you subscribe to all of these different quote unquote category kings. And then you have to try to figure out how to integrate them and how to make them talk, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so again, if I knew how difficult this was going to be, I may have just said, hey, let's be a category king. I can see 1,000 reasons why people do that. But I still think that's the wrong thing for most small business owners.
Yeah.
And a real estate investor truly is a small business owner, right? And the statistics don't lie. I mean, the majority of businesses in this country have 20 employees or less. And I'm talking like, 80% plus has 20 employees or less. But I think of a small business as typically 5 employees or less. And quite frankly, there's a huge percentage of what we call solopreneurs, right?
Yeah.
The individual entrepreneur out there on their own. And so I know that's where most real estate investors get started.
Mm-hmm.
And so the challenge for you as a solopreneur and you're just getting started, now all of a sudden, there's a lot of things you have to do as a business owner, right? And I don't know that technology should be super high on the list, that you have to figure out how to integrate and build this dynamic system so that I've got visibility into my business and I can know what's working, right? I should be able to plug into a platform that kind of already does all of that for us. And so I think the term all-in-one definitely gets overused and overhyped in our space.
Yeah.
But, that's always what comes to mind. But I don't know that it still is quite fair, because I know there's a lot of folks that claim to be an all-in-one, but yet then they're not a phone system, or maybe they don't do follow-up.
Right. Yeah. All is it's a big word, right? So
right.
Want to find motivated seller leads online, but don't know where to start? Download our free 2019 Motivated Seller Keyword Report today. AdWords nerds have spent over $5 million this year researching the most profitable keywords for finding motivated seller leads. And you can grab these exact keywords when you download our report at www.adwordsnerds.com/keywords.
Yeah, and it's really fascinating to me. You were talking about it. It really occurred to me because, you're exactly right. There's kind of like this division between the people who, they settle on a piece of software like REI Black Book, it has everything that they need. And I'll tell you that this is kind of like what I do in my business, right? Like I'm subscribed to 500 software as a service companies,
yeah.
right? And we connect them all with something like Zapier or whatever. But what ends up happening, and I'm kind of dealing with this now, like, just kind of making it personal, right? And I'm dealing with this now, is that system, although it's very flexible in the sense that I can remove a piece if I don't like it, or, the individual pieces of software are extremely well kept up or whatever it is, it's very brittle in the sense that the connections between everything are the point where the breakdown happens. So for example, like we run a lot of Facebook ads, and we run the Facebook ad to like a ClickFunnels landing page, and the ClickFunnels landing page has a Zap that puts it into ActiveCampaign, and then ActiveCampaign puts them into our sales funnel and sends the emails. And we were split testing a page, and we sort of put in a different form. But because the form had a different form ID, it didn't send those leads through the Zap, right, into ActiveCampaign. And so, we recently hired someone to come in, it's like, I always say like the cobbler's son has no shoes, right? So it's
100%.
like we run Facebook ads for clients all the time, but I just didn't have the bandwidth to run my own. So I brought someone in, and they're great. And he kind of specializes in agencies. So he went through our whole funnel, and he's like, literally on every page, something's broken. Right? So it's like 400 pages of broken stuff. And it's because of the way that kind of system is set up, it's easy to miss that. So it's fascinating to me that kind of what you're talking about is, because you guys do everything in-house, it's more complex for you to keep everything updated, keep everything managed, right? But if you don't do it that way, and you do it kind of the way that we're doing it, that complexity of management, it just is on my shoulders now, right? It's not on your shoulders, it's on my shoulders, right? Because I have to sort of Frankenstein together this giant thing. And I think you're absolutely right. For the average investor who is not technical, they do not want to be kind of waist deep in Zapier integrations and all that stuff. So I think that's a huge value proposition.
Yeah, so that really has what's allowed us to stand apart, if you will, and become an industry leader in the real estate investing space. I mean, that still is our niche. That still is our focus. We do have a whole separate small business tools and things like that, but I don't really talk much about that because we've been in the real estate investing space for so long. But the key there I think well, another piece I should say is that not only does the complexity get passed to you as the business owner, if you're going to do this multiple system, chaos, if you will, but then the really hard part comes in, and it's like, what is the central source of truth? So now all of a sudden, this platform says you got 100 leads. This platform says you got 150. What's the gap? Where is it? And just some of the complexities. There's little bitty things that I think that you could do. And so for your audience, if they're really thinking about, paid traffic strategies, whether it be Facebook ads or pay-per-click, and I know SEO is not necessarily considered a paid traffic strategy. In my world, I still say it is, because you're going to pay for it in time or money or hire somebody.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
The sweat of your brow, you still got to put it in. Yep.
Yep. But, the importance of the immediate response whenever those leads inquire is absolutely critical, right? So now all of a sudden they go to the Facebook lead ad or whatever, and they opt in. Then we want to be able to shoot them a text message right away, right? And we want to assign a task to our sales rep or our inside sales agent, right? We want to make sure that they call the lead back ASAP. And if they don't call back, then I want to make sure that they're tagged to call them back again the second day or the third day. If I want to call back 10 times, whatever your process is, you should be able to define the process in a system that can do all of that extremely quick. And my counterpart, Josh, who heads up my marketing team, as you know, he's got some great stats, and I wish I knew them off the top of my head because but it talks about the increased conversion or the increased opportunity if you can respond to a lead within the first 5 minutes, right?
Yes.
And it's something like 100x. So it's not even like a small thing. It's something like ridiculous. You increase your chances if you can respond quickly, which I'm sure you could probably attest to with the clients that you have and the world you're in. Well,
literally, I was going to say, so like while you're talking, the 1 in 5, the within 5 minutes number is a very real number. So we found the exact same thing totally differently. We were looking at all of our clients who had the highest close rates, and almost to a person, right? The sooner that they followed up, the higher their close rate was going to be off the exact same leads. And in fact, the within 5 minutes thing, the way that we found that was one of our really early clients, actually. So there's a Joe McCall who does a lot of education in the space around lease options and stuff like that.
Yeah, I know Joe well.
Yeah, and
he was actually in the mortgage business. This is crazy connection.
Yeah,
back in that mortgage business, he was one of the clients that we provided the mortgages for and everything else way back in 2006, 8, 9. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, that's wild, man. Yeah, and he is, I would say, like of all the investors that I've known, maybe in like the top 3 in terms of like being systems oriented and like automation oriented. And like his whole thing is like every time I would talk to him, he'd be like, oh, I'm with my family in Prague. We're like backpacking Prague while my business runs itself, And I'm like, so, but in any case, his team would routinely every single time follow up within 5 minutes. And so we would always compare like close rates, right? So we'd say like average national close rate for direct mail leads typically is like 1 out of 30. And then for online leads, it started at 1 out of 20. Over the last like 3 or 4 years, we've probably gotten it down to about 1 out of 10. So like average client closes 1 lead for every 10 that they get. Joe, and this is during the days when it was closer to 1 out of 20, was routinely closing like 1 out of 6, 1 out of 8. Like, and that's a huge deal. Like,
absolutely.
Spread out over the course of a year or 5 years, that kind of like systematic advantage is absolutely massive. But it is, I will tell you this, Damon, so one of the reasons I wanted to have you on, it is so hard to get investors to do that, right? And with good reason. Like my email response time in my own business is probably like once a month, right? Which is why I hire people to respond for me, right? But it's like, I get it. So, we can say that like, yeah, you got to follow up within 5 minutes. From a sort of like tactical standpoint, like are there ways that you can make that easier? You mentioned texting, right?
Yep.
Like what can investors do in order to close that gap so that they can follow up faster, talk to more sellers, you close more deals. So how do we actually do that?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing is to make sure that, and I honestly, I almost take this for granted because to be in the game, you have to have a website that converts if you're going to be doing online stuff, right? So, and for us, what that means is proven templates out of the box that you can set up within 5 minutes, right? And have your website set up, proven templates that we know convert. And then how can you easily just, select your follow-up? And if follow-up is text, then fine, you can add a text, you can create tasks, and we call them workflows. But all of that stuff is just in the system right out of the box, right? And so the key to this is the key to business, period. And I've been doing this, business for a long time too now, and I face all the same challenges, no different. Whenever I get leads, my leads are different though, right? No different. You're an agency owner, right? I'm a software provider. We're talking to real estate investors, but we all have the same problem. How do we ensure consistent follow-up with every prospect that comes in our door, right? So that we maximize every opportunity. And so, we do that, whether it's text, ringless voicemail, emails, tagging yourself for live follow-up, direct mail, whatever it is, it's all ready to go inside of an easy follow-up builder. And again, what we do is we kind of took that complexity on and said, look, we're going to go make all of this stuff and happen in the back end. You, from the small business owner, you just need to say, this is the workflow that I need. We do a ton of training on this as well. I keep referencing Josh. He actually just did a really good training that I'll make sure we provide to your audience.
Yeah.
But it is basically what we call the perfect follow-up, seller acquisition follow-up, right? So what does that look like? Whether they came in via Facebook, whether they came in via your website, and the other thing that I think is really important. We're talking about online ads, so naturally most people immediately think, oh, that starts at my website. Not always, as you know, They could call in. And so now all of a sudden, if you can create consistent follow-up, whether they called in, whether they text in, whether they went to your website, whether they submitted a Facebook lead ad, any of those, it doesn't matter how they get into the system should consistently follow up and do it quickly. And I was doing some math just on your numbers with old Joe. Okay.
Old Joe.
Joe and I go way back. He and I are in a few masterminds together still today.
Yeah.
But so Joe's a good dude. In fact, our kids play in a basketball league, so we used to see him every Saturday. But
cool.
But so if Joe's doing closing one out of 6, and your average Joe is closing 1 out of 20.
I like it. It's average Joe and then above average Joe. I like it. It's good. It's good.
So let's say that the deal's $10,000. Okay, so what would you guesstimate the cost to generate those 20 leads would be? I know it's all over the board.
Yeah, depending on the market, between $100 and $200 a piece. So you could say anywhere between $2,000. Well, what am I saying? Is that right? Yeah,
$2,000 to $4,000.
Sure.
Yep. So $2,000 to $4,000 that I would have to spend to generate those 20 leads.
Yeah.
Now, here's the interesting part. If your average deal is $10,000, Joe spends, let's just use the $4,000. Joe spends $4,000 and generates $33,000 as opposed to $10,000, right? So your average Joe is generating $10,000 on that same ad spend, and your above average Joe is making $33,000. And it all becomes, it's just that one key piece is super fast response and then continuous follow-up, right? So it doesn't just stop. And that's actually one of the things that we do in that the seller acquisition training that Josh does, is we kind of show you like, hey, look, doesn't matter where the lead comes from, whether they call, whether they fill out a web form, text in, right? So we do keywords, all that good fun stuff. That triggers what we call the 10-day follow-up, right? So in that 10-day window, we increase the frequency and the urgency of the messaging. And then if we don't really get a hold of them in the 10 days, again, a lot of people stop,
right?
But then we just drop them into what we call our 1-year follow-up. And we got this from probably one of our most successful students. I don't say most successful, but super successful. Her name's Marcy. She's out of Texas. And she implemented a follow-up campaign in her own business about a year ago. She had been involved in real estate, was kind of working full-time. I'm sure you know the drill, right? Working full-time, had done a deal here or there, wasn't finding any consistency, had all these leads that were dead leads in her mind, in her own words, actually.
Yeah.
And in January, she actually built out a follow-up campaign that was 1-year follow-up, and she just put all those dead leads in that 1 year follow-up. And it was like 400 leads. I talked to her by July. She was consistently doing 2 to 3 deals a month.
Wow.
We interviewed her on our podcast. We kind of talked, well, not really podcast. We do a Facebook live series, but we interviewed her, kind of chatted with her. And it was like, what is the key difference? And it's like, well, like I literally, as soon as a lead is quote unquote dead and I can't get a hold of them, then I just drop them into this 1 year follow-up. I forget about it.
Right.
I don't have to worry about anything because the system is going to continually touch them. And then we've got it set up so that whenever they respond, so now that prospect is engaged. And that's the key from a marketing perspective. I know you know this better than anybody on the planet. Like, we don't know when they're going to respond. We don't know what that triggering event is for them to be ready to sell their house, right? Mm-hmm. Something initiated that first call, or them to fill out the web form, or to click on that Facebook ad. Something initiated it at that moment, but then life happens, right? Mm-hmm. So it's super important for them at that moment. They know it's an issue. So I got a couple of minutes. Let's go ahead and fill out this web form. And then all of a sudden something else happens. It's baseball practice, it's dance recitals, it's, the job. I got to go on a trip. Whatever happens. And we don't know that.
Yeah.
And we don't know what's going on. So we can't necessarily sit there and say, okay, well, we followed up for 10 days and we increased the frequency and the urgency, and they just weren't interested.
Right.
Well, they just weren't interested during that period. So we got to drop them into another follow-up sequence. So that's really kind of what we focus on.
If I could implant something inside every single real estate investor's mind before they do any kind of marketing, offline or online specifically, it would be that, right? Because it is the multiplier on everything that you do. And the flip side of that, right, is like, let's say, just like you said, like I'm producing more money for every dollar spent on marketing. That actually gives you a bigger budget. It means you can spend more. You can afford to acquire leads at a higher cost. That actually gets you a bigger percentage of the market. And then on top of that, if you have a systematic process, something that's happening to every single lead, you can now start to test and improve that process over time. Because it's uniform, you can be like, well, what happens if, on day 10, I send out this email versus the first email? And you can watch that over time. The compounding effect of being able to systematize your marketing is huge on multiple levers. So it's on multiple levels. So this is one of the highest leverage things you can do. Now, we're coming to the end. So there's a couple of things I want to say. First of all, you mentioned this, you sort of blew past it, but I want to say this too. You guys do an incredible job of educating the marketplace. You put out a ton of educational material. So I really want to laud you guys for that. I know you've invested a lot in that part of the business, and I think it's absolutely massive. The other thing is that, so we have a link for people that want to jump in. So typically when people jump into REI Black Book, they have to pay a licensing fee. It's like $1,000, right? But for listeners to this podcast, we're going to waive that, right? So if people are interested, just if you're curious, want to check out the software or whatever, go to reiblackbook.com/nerds. It's reiblackbook.com/nerds. That's the link. You get that $1,000 kind of waived right away. So it's the significant savings there. When people go to that link, like kind of what can they expect? What's going to happen if they're curious about checking out REI Black Book?
Yeah, there'll be a little bit of a demo video there. It's going to list out all the features. You're going to see everything that we do. Again, we provide websites. We provide your phone system. We provide your text messaging system. We provide email marketing, ringless voicemails. We provide your complete contact management system. And then that helps you on all of the lead generation and marketing, which we've obviously heavily focused on today's call. But then there's transaction management. How do you actually manage the deal? How do you disposition? How do you manage your buyers list? Do you want to text out that deal to your entire buyers list? Then, okay, you need to be able to do that easily. How do you segment your contacts, right? All of that stuff is completely available. And we're going to give you an entire list of everything that we do right inside the platform. And, there's one other thing I just kind of want to mention here as I'm thinking through it though, because, a lot of times people, and it depends upon where you're at in the business. And if you're listening to the podcast right now, you could be seasoned, you could be brand new. And then, if you're fairly new, or maybe you don't have deals consistently, you very well could be asking yourself, okay, well, when is the right time to put a system like this in place in my business?
Yeah.
And I got to tell you guys straight up, before I got into the mortgage business, I had a stint in between my military career and the mortgage space where I really focused heavily on business consulting and IT technology systems and things like that. And I'll tell you right now, it is 10 times harder to go put in a system to an existing business, right? So if you're just getting started, the best time to put these systems in place is right out of the gate. And then the question becomes, well, what about affordability? Can I afford it, right? And we've got different plans, anywhere from $97 to $297 a month, right? But let me tell you, just think about those numbers. Do you want to be average Joe, spending $4,000 to get $10,000? Or would you rather spend that $4,000 and get $33,000 back? And I'm telling you, the key difference between, the Joe McCalls of the world, Matt Terrios, any of those guys, it is because they have systems in place that allow them to basically take more profit off the table and reinvest back into their marketing to grow and to scale their business. So don't make the mistake of saying, I'm not ready yet, right? So take a look at that, early on in your business. You want to put those systems in place because it does become infinitely, or I guess I should say exponentially more difficult to implement systems after you've got an established business really up and running.
Yeah. My friend Nick has a great metaphor where he always says, it's like your goal is to fill up a bucket, and you got a bucket, you got like the faucet that comes out of your house, and you got a hose. And he's like, you should probably hook up the hose before you turn the faucet on. That's probably a good idea, because when the water's coming out, you're trying to hook up the hose, you're going to get wet and all the water's spraying everywhere. And you just look like kind of an idiot. So maybe you do it the first time. And it's true, man. So hey, listen, everybody, guys and gals, lads and ladies that are listening to this. Damon is he's got a kind voice. He's a humble man. 90% of what he said is just like hot fire, and you need to just put it in your business right away. It's like literally, this is some kind of potentially life-changing stuff. If you haven't been thinking about this, this is your clue to wake up and start thinking about it. So Damon, I just wanted to say thank you so much for coming and talking to everybody. We will put the link to REI Black Book up on the show notes, which is at adwordsnerds.com/podcast. But everybody should go out, check out REI Black Book and everything that Damon and his team are building over there. It's very impressive. And man, this was a blast. I really appreciate it. I always have fun talking to you, and I just appreciate you in general. So thanks for coming on.
I appreciate the time, man. And likewise, man, always a good time chatting.
All right. I hope you enjoyed this week's interview. I certainly did. Like I said, we're in sort of a weird time. So next week, I'm going to do an entire episode on how the coronavirus is affecting the marketing world for motivated sellers. So make sure that you tune into that. But if you want kind of faster updates than I'm able to do here on the podcast, I'm going to be doing my best to post a whole bunch of our kind of private data set from, nationally, investors across the world going after motivated sellers. I'm going to be posting that in our Facebook group. So you can find that at adwordsnerds.com/group. It's completely free to join. I'm not going to be putting any of this like behind a, coaching program or anything like that. I want this to be freely available, because really during this time, I feel like the most value I can provide to our community is to educate you guys and be honest and clear about what's going on in the space that I have knowledge in, which is the online marketing space. So we're going to be watching how the number of searches is going up or down over time. We're going to be watching how the types of searching changes. We're going to be watching what happens in Facebook, what happens in Google, what happens in SEO, what happens in advertising. We're going to be watching that. We're going to be giving that information to you guys. So tune in next week. I'm going to try to summarize a bunch of those thoughts in next week's episode. And then make sure you join in the group for faster updates. It's adwordsnerds.com/group. That's adwordsnerds.com/group. And we'll be happy to have you. All right, everybody, have a great rest of your week. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I will be talking to you soon.
This is the podcastfactory.com.